Okay, so today we're going to learn about the normal distribution when we're just building on to standard deviation. So the normal distribution you have seen before because this is where the bell curve comes from. So the normal distribution follows a bell curve. So for example here, so I've got my bell curve. And our standard deviation is going to help us break this up into pieces. So right in the middle of our bell curve is where our mean is at. So then we can go plus 1 standard deviation. We've got minus 1 standard deviation. Then we can have plus 2 standard deviations, minus 2 standard deviations, and then on the very end here, plus 3 and minus 3, which probably seems a little strange at first, but basically you find your mean and then you find what a standard deviation is using what we did yesterday, right? Or if you're watching this the same day, in the other video about standard deviation. And the reason we can use that is because once you found your mean and you've got 1 standard deviation higher, 1 standard deviation lower, 68% of your data is going to fall between 1 standard deviation either way. So this is the bulk of our data here. This is 68%. Between 2 standard deviations, so either 2 up from the mean or 2 below the mean, 95% of your data is going to occur between these two things. So when we talk about 3 standard deviations either way, 99.7% of your data is going to fall between 3 standard deviations either way. So the good thing about it is once you found your mean and your standard deviations, you really only worry about like 3 standard deviations because all we'd be leaving out is 0.03%. So we can really get the full picture basically by just using 3 standard deviations. Okay, so now let's break this down one step further. If 68% of your data is between minus 1 standard deviation and plus 1 standard deviation, we can actually say what each piece is, right? So if the whole thing's 68, we split it in half, and we're going to have 34% of our data here, 34% of our data here. Okay? Likewise, this whole thing is 95, but we take out the piece that's 68, and we split our remaining percentages, and this will be 13.5, this will be 13.5. Same thing out here. This whole piece within 2 standard deviations is 95%. So what's left? 4.7, so we're splitting that. 2.35%, 2.35%. So the normal distribution, this is the bulk of it. This is what you need to know. Okay, and now I'll do an example to kind of show you what we're actually kind of talking about here. All right, so for example, let's say the mean test score is, we'll make it a good mean. How about 77? one standard deviation. That's a standard. Is 5 points. So if we think about our normal curve, step one, our mean goes right in the middle. So our mean is 77. I'll go ahead and draw. Okay, so our mean is 77. That's smack dab in the middle of our normal distribution. So now I'll just start right here. So plus 1 standard deviation. My standard deviation is 5. So this score right here, 77 plus 5, 82. Go to the other side. 77 minus 5, because I'm going down a standard deviation. 72. And I'm going to keep either adding or subtracting 5 to fill out for 2 standard deviations and 3 standard deviations. Okay, 82 plus 5, 87. Okay, so I filled in my mean and my different standard deviations. And we can use this to answer questions like, let's say, what percentage scored higher than 72? So that's a question that we could answer from our bell curve here. So step one, I'm going to find 72. Notice it's right here. And then I'm going to use these percentages, okay? So which ones are higher than 72? I've got 34, 34. So I've got this 68 here. So I'm going to do 68 plus 13.5 plus 2.35. I'm just adding it all up. So 68 plus 13.5, 78, 81.5, plus 2, 83.5, so 83.85%. Just by finding these from these numbers up here, so 34 plus 34, and I got 83.85. I've not had my coffee yet, so if that's wrong, just break it to me nicely. Just break it to me nicely. But that's an example of what you could do here. Okay, so then we could also answer what percentage how about did not score between, we'll say 67 and 87. Okay, so I'm going to look at this piece, thinking about that's 2 standard deviations. So 95% of our data is in this range. So what percentage did not score in this range? That remaining 5%.